الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. One of the main reasons for the quick expansion of the religion of Islam, the fast growth of the religion of Islam, is that the religion of Islam and the message of Rasulullah was not an exclusivist message. The message of Islam transcends all boundaries of race, of culture, of nationality, of borders. And this is one of the main features that has made the religion of Islam to be the fastest growing religion on earth. Islam is not associated with a specific race, with a specific group of people, with a specific language, with a specific color. While you see other religions, sometimes they're associated with specific groups of people or specific regions. In Islam, you don't see that. And this is why the message of Islam resonated with people. Immediately from the beginning, when Rasulullah began to invite people to the religion of Islam, immediately you saw the exponential growth amongst the Muslims. And the Muslims, they were not all from one group of people. The Muslims, they came from various areas, where Rasulullah had Salman al-Farisi, Suhaib al-Rumi, Bilal al-Habashi. He had companions from all over the world. He had Salman the Persian, Suhaib the Roman. He had from Yemen, he had from Ethiopia, Bilal al-Habashi, from Abyssinia. So Islam transcends all of these boundaries. And this is why we see that within 50 years, just within 50 years after the death of Rasulullah, the majority of the Muslims were non-Arab. Even though Islam began and was born in the Arabian Peninsula, and Rasulullah spoke Arabic and he lived amongst Arabs, but only 50 years, that quick, within 50 years, the majority of the Muslims were non-Arabs. They didn't speak Arabic, they didn't understand Arabic. And Islam has no problem with that. The Islam of a person who's a non-Arab is not worse than the Islam of a person who's Arab. And the Islam of a person who's Arab is not better than the Islam of a person who's non-Arab. Because the religion of Islam, it came and it set a foundation. Inna akramakum inda Allah atqakum. The best out of you in the eyes of Allah is the one with most piety, the one who's closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the one who speaks Arabic, not the one who is from an Arabic heritage, from an Arabic culture. And this is why Rasulullah, in front of all of the Muslims, during the battle of the Ahzab, he said, Salmanu minna Ahl al-Bayt. He said, Salman is from us, the Ahl al-Bayt. Even though Salman wasn't an Arab, Salman was a Persian. Or Rasulullah, he came and he brought Bilal, the freed slave from Abyssinia, the freed slave from Ethiopia. He came and he made him be the spokesperson for Islam. Who's the spokesperson for Islam? The one who's calling the adhan. The one who strangers, when they come and they want to hear of what the Muslims have to say, the first voice that they hear before hearing the voice of Rasulullah or any other Muslim, they hear the adhan. Today every non-Muslim has probably heard the adhan. You hear it, reciting the call to prayer. The call to prayer, the person that used to call the prayer for Rasulullah was Bilal. Bilal, a man who was not even an Arab. And when he used to speak, instead of saying, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, he used to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. He wasn't able to pronounce it. So some of the Muslims, they came and they thought that since they're Arab, they should go and they should be the ones calling the adhan. Rasulullah tells them, Sinu Bilalin Shinun Andallah. When Bilal says Ashhadu, in the eyes of Allah, it's Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we see that Islam is not limited to culture, to boundaries, to borders. Who has limited the religion of Islam? We have. Today you go to some communities, you see this masjid is the masjid for the Iraqis. This masjid is the masjid for the Iranian. This masjid is the masjid for the Afghani. This is the masjid for the Khoja. This is the masjid for the Pakistani. Does Allah say this in the Quran, that this masjid is for this group of people and this masjid is for that group of people? No. Allah says, وَإِنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. The mosques belong to Allah. They don't say the masjid is for this group of people or that group of people. All mosques belong to Allah. But we see that we have created these barriers amongst ourselves. Within our own community, within our own Muslim community, we have created these barriers that divide individuals, and this is we are destroying the image of the religion of Islam when we do that. We are blocking the religion of Islam from progressing. We are coming and we are stopping, we are limiting the religion of Islam through our cultures. Now culture, there's nothing wrong with it, as long as it's not limiting the message of the religion of Islam. So from day one, Rasulullah did not want an exclusivist community. He didn't want to be a fringe group that individuals, they would see them, oh, these are the Muslims, they do their own thing, they live their own life and they practice. No, Rasulullah wanted Muslims to interact. He wanted Muslims to go out in the open, to practice publicly, and be there so that people see them and they see others. Don't be an exclusivist community. This is one of the first things that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa did. So this is why Rasulullah, one of the first things he did in the 6th year after Hijrah, after Rasulullah had gone through war and battle with Quraysh, the people of Mecca, now Rasulullah in the 6 years after the Hijrah, meaning just a few years ago, there was the battle of Badr, the battle of Uhud, the battle of the Ahzab. Rasulullah, he has a dream. And he comes out and he tells the Muslims, I had a dream. I had a dream that we were performing the Umrah, that we were in Masjid al-Haram and we were doing tawaf around the Kaaba, circumambulating around the Kaaba, and we shaved our heads when we came back and we were able to perform the Umrah. So some of the Muslims, they couldn't believe it. How is Rasulullah having this dream when they're in a state of war with the people of Quraysh? The people of Quraysh were in a state of war with the Muslims. It was just a few years ago, and the declaration of war was still there. There was no truce. They just left after the battle of the Ahzab. So Rasulullah, he says, I had this dream, and that means if a prophet had a dream, that means this is an order from God. So he tells the Muslims, we're going to go and perform the Umrah. So the Muslims, they pack their bags, they wear their ihram, and they don't take weapons. They don't take heavy weaponry with them. They just take their personal sword with them. It's to show that they're not going to wage war. They're just carrying their personal sword with them. And second, it was during the Ashhur al-Haram, during the 4 months, to show that Muslims are respecting the norm of society at that time. And Rasulullah wanted to do this so that people see the Muslims, so that the Muslims are not just living in their own mosques, in their own community, they're practicing, so that people see that the Muslims, no, they're not a fringe group. They actually do the Hajj, and the Hajj was something that was practiced by others at that time. And this would help other people get a different perspective of the religion of Islam. Second, so that the Muslims do da'wah. It's an opportunity to educate people on the religion of Islam. The Muslims, they go out and they start praying, they start doing all of their actions in front of other people, and this is a sign of da'wah. And this is why I always tell people, they say, you know, some people, they say, I'm embarrassed to pray in public. I don't want people to see me pray. You don't realize what that prayer does when you are praying in public. It's not just you. Don't think about it as yourself. When you are praying in public, there are hundreds and thousands of people looking at you. If you're praying in an airport, don't be shy. First of all, you're praying to your Lord. You're praying to your Creator. Are you doing anything wrong? No. You're doing your duty. And second, this is an opportunity to spread the message of Islam. This is an opportunity to educate people about the religion of Islam. When people, they see you praying, they're going to go and think about this person that is so devoted, that he goes and he prays even in public. Even in an era of Islamophobia, in times of danger, he's standing and he's praying. And this will make people learn about the religion of Islam. Someone might see a person praying, then they'll go read about the religion of Islam. They'll go and they want to learn about that person. So this is what Rasulullah wanted to do. He didn't want to make the Muslims at that time be a fringe group, an exclusivist religion. He wanted to go out in the open and announce who he is. If you're not doing anything wrong, why are you embarrassed? Why should you be embarrassed of your identity? Why should you be embarrassed of your religion? So the Muslims, they begin marching, and the Arabian Peninsula at that time, everyone hears that Rasulullah and a group of men, 1,300, or some say 1,000, up to 1,800. They are going with their ihram. They're not taking weapons. They're going to a group of people that were fighting them just a few years earlier. So Quraysh, they hear about this. And now Quraysh is put in a difficult situation, because Mecca was a city of pilgrims. Pilgrims from all over the world, they would come and they would perform the Hajj. If Quraysh does not allow these individuals who are not armed, they're coming and they want to perform the Umrah, it's not going to look good for them in front of the Arab tribes. So the Quraysh, they also have this, image to keep. Now they're put in a very difficult situation. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa is going, and they have their camels, and they put the animal that you want to sacrifice. If you are taking it with you, they put a mark on it. And this is something, one of the ahkam of the Hajj right now. If you take it with you, you have to put a mark on it. So they used to put a mark on the camel, on the sheep that they're going to sacrifice, and they began marching. And they don't ride it. They take it with them. So everyone who would look at the Muslims, they would see that, no, they're pilgrims. They have nothing to hide. Rasulullah goes. The mushrikeen at that time, Quraysh, they come and they put out Khalid ibn al-Walid and several of the mushrikeen to intercept the Muslims and not allow them to enter Mecca. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa he changes his path, and he goes to an area in the borders, in the outskirts of Mecca, by the name of Hudaybiya. He goes to Hudaybiya, and the camel of Rasulullah sits there. And then, what are they going to do? Now they have to talk. The Muslims, they don't want to enter with force, because those guys, they promise that if they enter with force, there's going to be bloodshed, there's going to be fighting. So now there was a series of delegations going from the people of the Prophet, going into Quraysh, and the people of Quraysh, they come out until it became very dangerous for the Muslims. Quraysh, they said, we're not going to let you in. We're not going to let you in, and that's it. Rasulullah, he sends one man, he goes in. While he's speaking to Quraysh, they come and they kill the camel of that man. Then he goes, after the Muslims, they find out that this man, he went and they tried to kill him, and they killed his camel. So Rasulullah, he says, we have to send someone else. Rasulullah is committed. He's there. And he's decided to perform the Umrah. So they come out, and the people of Quraysh, they come and they start throwing rocks and arrows at the Muslims. Now the Muslims are very scared. They're sitting there and they're like a sitting duck. Anyone could come and attack them. They could come and kill them right away. They're sitting right by the Meccans. And Mecca had a very, very strong army at that time. So Rasulullah, he says, let's send someone else. So he tells Umar ibn al-Khattab. He wanted to find someone that in the previous battles that the Muslims fought, this person did not fight. This person had no so that Quraysh has no grudge against this person. First he wanted to send Imam Ali. He saw that Imam Ali, in all of the battles, he has a bad history with Quraysh. He didn't send Imam Ali. He wanted to send Quraysh. He wanted to send Zubayr. He saw that Zubayr also, he had an active role in the battle. So he came to Umar and he tells him, "Oh Umar, go inside and talk to them." Umar, he tells him, "I'm afraid, O Rasulullah. I'm afraid. I'm from the family of Adi and I don't have family there to protect me if anything happens. Let's send Uthman. Let's send Uthman ibn Affan, because Uthman ibn Affan, he's from Bani Umayyah. And Bani Umayyah, he's related to Abu Sufyan." So the Muslims, they decide on sending, Rasulullah decides on sending Uthman ibn Affan. He goes in and Abu Sufyan respects him because there's a family relationship with him. And he stays there, but now Uthman hasn't come out. Uthman hasn't come out and the Muslims are afraid of what's going on. So there, the Muslims were sitting under a tree and Rasulullah, he says, "Let's do a pact of protection, that we will stand and we will defend one another." Because some of the mushrikeen, they were hoping that if a battle begins at that time, the Muslims are only a maximum 1,800. If anything happens, some of these Muslims are going to leave Rasulullah if a battle begins. So they came and they saw that the Muslims, no, they're very strong and they're remaining with Rasulullah, and their faith in Rasulullah is so strong that the mushrikeen, they were surprised. What has Rasulullah done that these men, they have such strong faith in him? So at that time when Uthman was there, the Muslims, they were afraid. Rasulullah, he wanted to reaffirm that the Muslims are solid and they're going to have a strong footing and they're going to stand with him and defend one another. So they did a bay'ah with one another. They did a bay'ah with one another under a tree. And this is referred to as Bay'at al-Ridwan. Bay'at al-Ridwan, and Allah refers to the group of people who were in that bay'ah. Allah says in the Quran, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ فعلم ما في قلوبهم فأنزل السكينة عليهم وأثابهم فتحا قريبا. Allah rewarded them. Allah is satisfied with the mu'mineen who gave bay'ah to you during those difficult times, and He knows what's in their heart, and He brought down the sakina, the tranquility upon them. Meaning that now they're rest assured. Now they're rest assured once again. As they were there, Uthman comes out and he tells them that Quraysh has made a vow. Quraysh had made a hilf, a vow, that they are not going to allow the Muslims to enter this year. This is the reason. They said, "We don't want the Muslims to enter this year." So one of the men who came, the spokesperson, now there's diplomacy going on between the Muslims and between Quraysh. Before it was battle, now this is the beginning signs of diplomacy. A man by the name of Suhail ibn Amr, he comes out to speak on behalf of Quraysh. He comes and he says, Quraysh has decided that you don't enter this year. No one is entering this year, and we will allow you to enter the following year. The following year you enter, and we will write up a treaty. So they began to write up a treaty. They began to talk about what should be a part of this deal. What should they talk about? So they said, you come next year. Next year, you will come and you don't bring any weapons. You don't bring any armor. You don't bring anything. You come and you perform the Umrah for 3 days. For 3 days you stay in Mecca and then you leave. And second, this will be a beginning of a truce for 10 years. 10 years we will not go through battle, not go through war with one another. Because they were all tired. And Quraysh, they had so many people from amongst Quraysh. Some of the tribe leaders, their sons and their daughters were leaving them and joining Rasulullah. So they were tired of this circumstance, the situation. So they decided to make that truce. But then Quraysh, they said one thing. They said, if anyone from us, anyone from Quraysh, he leaves Quraysh, or she leaves Quraysh, and they join with the Muslims, you Muslims have to send that person back to us. But if anyone from you Muslims leaves you and joins us, then we will keep him and we will not send him back. So some of the Muslims, they saw that this was very unfair. What kind of transaction is this? If someone escapes from Quraysh, he joins the Muslims have to return him back. But if one of the Muslims ran away to Quraysh, then Quraysh does not need to send him back. They came to Rasulullah. Rasulullah told them, if anyone from you decides to go join Quraysh, then this person is not helpful to us anymore. Because Islam is not about force. It's about faith in your heart. If you decide to leave, then go ahead and leave. If anyone decides to go and join Quraysh, that is not our problem. And regarding the individuals who join the religion of Islam and want to join us, then this is a compromise that we have to make right now. And this shows us that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa was willing to make compromises. Today, you find some Muslims, no, I'm not going to make any compromise. I don't want to talk. I don't want to do anything. No. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa he was willing to make a compromise. And this is the Sulh al-Hudaybiya. This was one of the reasons why, for example, when Imam al-Rida was asked, why did he join Wilayat al-Ahd of Ma'mun? He said, Rasulullah, he also made a deal with Hudaybiya, with the kuffar. So it doesn't always mean that you don't talk to anyone and you're not willing to make any compromises. Sometimes you have to come and see what's the greater benefit. Rasulullah saw that the greater benefit for all of the Muslims and all of the inhabitants of Arabia at that time to stop the war, to stop the bloodshed. Now a few people, they want to join from Quraysh and the Muslims have to send them back. This is sacrificing one or two people for the greater good, for a greater good, for the good of the rest. So while they were doing that, while they were about to write the treaty, the son of Suhail ibn Amr by the name of Abu Jandal, his son, the man who's doing a treaty with the Prophet, his son, he runs away from Quraysh and he joins the side of the Muslims. This was what was going on with Quraysh. So many people were joining the religion of Islam. So this man, he's making a treaty against the Muslims in his own benefit. His son, he goes and he joins the side of the Muslims. So that man, he became very angry and he said, I'm not going to do the transaction unless you return my son. So Rasulullah, he came. First he told him, we haven't even signed the transaction yet. We haven't done anything yet. He said, I'm not going to do the deal unless you give me back my son. So Rasulullah, he told his son, Abu Jandal, he told him, go back. He told him, go back and Allah will bring you victory. Don't worry, Allah is with the one who has taqwa. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. The one who has taqwa and Allah, the one who has piety in Allah, Allah will create a solution to every problem. Don't worry about it. As long as you have Allah, then you know you have the most powerful solution with you. You know you have Allah on your back, even if everyone turns against you. And this man, Abu Jandal, he was being tortured by Quraysh. He was being tortured by his father. And it wasn't just him. There were tens of others, hundreds of others that were in Mecca. They were trapped. They weren't allowed to go to the Muslims. So Rasulullah, he saw the greater good of the overall community, to stop the bloodshed, to stop the fighting. So they begin to write the treaty. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa he tells Imam Ali was the writer. He tells him, write Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That man, Suhail ibn Amr, he says, what is this Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? We don't know this Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, he says, we don't want that. He said, write Bismika Allahumma, in the name of God. Write that. We don't want Rahman ar-Rahim. So Rasulullah told Amir al-Mu'min, okay, write Bismika Allahumma. And then he tells him, Rasulullah told him, write, this is a deal signed by Rasulullah and Suhail ibn Amr. So that man, Suhail ibn Amr, he says, if we accept you as Rasulullah, then we wouldn't be in this situation. I don't believe that you are Rasulullah. So erase Rasulullah and write Muhammad ibn Abdullah. So the Muslims, they became very angry. Amir al-Mu'mineen here, he told Rasulullah told him, erase my name, erase Rasulullah and write Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, oh Rasulullah, I believe you and I want to do what you want me to do, but my hands cannot erase Rasulullah. So Rasulullah tells him, put my finger on the place where it says Rasulullah. He put his finger on it and he erased it himself. Rasulullah, he himself erased it. Look at the humbleness of this man. A leader. He comes and he says, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to do this for the sake of the greater good of everyone, the greater good of the community and the greater good of the mission. And then he tells Amir al-Mu'mineen, oh Ali, one day you are also going to have to erase your name. He reminded Imam Ali, and then Imam Ali was reminded of this on the Battle of Siffin. After the Battle of Siffin, when they were doing the treaty, they came, Amr ibn al-As, he came and he told him, erase Amir al-Mu'mineen. Just write Ali ibn Abi Talib. So Amir al-Mu'mineen erased Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he said, this is a sunnah that is followed by the sunnah of Rasulullah. And Rasulullah reminded me of this. So they write the treaty, and the Muslims end up going back. The Muslims end up going back to Medina without having done the Umrah. And Rasulullah had a dream that they were going to do the Umrah. So there were individuals from amongst the Muslims that began to doubt in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And one of those who began to doubt in Rasulullah was Umar ibn al-Khattab. He says, when I saw that we did not go and perform the Umrah, the greatest doubt entered into my heart because I saw that we didn't go. Rasulullah had told them we were going to enter into Mecca, but they didn't enter into Mecca. They ended up doing a treaty, and now they have to go back the next year. So the Muslims returned back, and they thought that they lost. They thought that they had a very bad transaction. They can't. First of all, if anyone comes and joins them, they have to return this person. They weren't able to do that Umrah, and next time they go, they have to just go for 3 days like humiliated individuals. Some people, they had that perspective, but in reality, Rasulullah knew exactly what he was doing. Because it was that Hudaybiya peace treaty that opened the door for the Fath of Mecca, for the opening of Mecca. If it was not for that treaty, then the Muslims would not have been able to conquer Mecca legally. They wouldn't have had the right to conquer Mecca. And that treaty, it opened diplomatic relationships between the Muslims and Quraysh. So now people, they were not afraid to go and join the Muslims, because before that the Muslims were a fringe group. Anyone who associates with the Muslims, they will be sanctioned by Quraysh. Anyone who talks to the Muslims, Quraysh will attack this person, will abuse this person. So now the Muslims, they have the right to exist. And there's a diplomatic relations between the Muslims and Quraysh. So therefore, historians say that after that event, thousands of people began to go and see the Prophet. Now they have the right to leave Mecca, and they have the right to go and see the Muslims. And from other communities, they go there, and thousands of people began to join the religion of Islam. They went and they started joining the religion of Islam, and some of the heads of Quraysh, they came and they joined the religion of Islam during that time. One of them, they say, Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was the leader of the army against the Muslims, he came and he joined the religion of Islam. Amr ibn al-As, he joined the religion of Islam during that time. And there were several individuals that came and they ran away from Mecca. They came to the Muslims. So now, what is Rasulullah supposed to do? He has a treaty that if anyone comes to him, he has to return him back. So a few of them, one man by the name of Abu Basir, he came, he left Mecca. They were imprisoned in Mecca. He ran away and he went to the Muslims. So they sent men to capture him and to bring him back. They go back and they tell Rasulullah, this is a part of the treaty. So Rasulullah, he says, I'm not a person to break the treaty. He came to Abu Basir and he tells him, even though you are Muslim, but we have a treaty, we have a contract. And I'm a man of my words. Even if I have done it, if I have made a deal with a person who is from a different religion, I will keep that deal. And this is what Islam teaches us. Today you find certain individuals, they go and they make a deal, and then a few months later they come and they break the deal. This is not a man of principle. This is a man who is not a man of principle. Rasulullah was a man of principle. He came and he said, even though this was something that is going to harm a person from my community, this man, he came and he tells him, I accept you as the Prophet of God. Keep me, give me refuge. Rasulullah tells him, you have to go back. And he tells him, don't worry, Allah is going to bring a solution. Allah is going to bring a solution very quickly. They come and they take him. So Rasulullah, he lets go of his responsibility. That man, he's taken. That man, he takes the sword and he begins to fight those men. He begins to fight those men, and then he comes back to Rasulullah, Rasulullah tells him, you're not our responsibility anymore because we sent you. So that man, he goes and he does not stay in Medina and he does not stay in Mecca. He goes and he stays somewhere on the route of the ocean, the trading route between Mecca and the Levant, between Mecca and Sham. He stays there, and then tons of people, they escape from Mecca, those who have joined the religion of Islam. They escape from Mecca and they go and they join with that person. So these individuals, a group of people, they're Muslim, but they don't have the right to stay in Mecca because they're persecuted in Mecca. They don't have the right to go in Medina because Rasulullah is a man of his word. So they stayed there, and every time a caravan goes, it's passing by from Quraysh, it wants to go to the Levant, they would go and they would harass the caravan. Until Quraysh, they came to Rasulullah. Quraysh, Mecca, the people of Mecca, they came to Rasulullah and they tell him, oh Rasulullah, we don't want that, erase that part of the deal where you have to return someone to us. We don't want to have to deal with that. Because now our trade is in danger. Well, if anyone wants to join you, let them join you. So they erased that, and then you have hundreds of people, more people, they began to leave Mecca freely, and they would go and join Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So during that time, there was relative peace. From the south of Medina, Mecca, the Muslims, they know that there's a treaty that is signed and there's no war going on. So it was during that time that Rasulullah conquered Khaybar. And it was during that time that Rasulullah wrote letters. He wrote letters to the world leaders. And this is something that shows the universality of the religion of Islam. Today some people, they come and they say, oh, the religion of Islam was a group of people in Mecca and then it was spread by the sword. This is how it happened. No, Rasulullah was not like that. Rasulullah, from day one, he was showing the world that Islam is a religion meant to be for the whole world. Islam is a religion for everyone. And Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا كَافَّةً لِلنَّاسِ. We sent you to everyone. You're not a prophet only sent to the Arabs. In another verse, Allah says, هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. The religion of Islam, it's supposed to encompass everything. It's not a religion meant for a small group of people, a fringe religion, exclusivist religion. No, the religion of Islam is for everyone. And this is why Rasulullah, he came and he began to write letters. He had writers. They wrote letters 19 years after prophethood. Now it's the 7th year after the Hijrah. Rasulullah writes letters to 6 world leaders, all around the Muslims. And this shows what kind of a political leader he was. He wasn't just a spiritual leader. He was a political leader, and not just a political leader, but a very successful one, where he would speak to the kings and he would have letters that would be written towards the kings. So he sends a leader to the Caesar of Rome, he sends a leader to the Pope, he sends a leader to the Coptic leader in Egypt, he sends a leader to Najashi, to Yemen, to the Persian Empire. He sends them letters with ambassadors, with messengers. They go. Now, some of them, they respected the message of Rasulullah. For example, they say, and Najashi, he joined the religion of Islam. And he accepted the message of Rasulullah. And in his letters, he would reply back to Rasulullah. He would say, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Peace be upon you, O Messenger of God. And others, for example, the Caesar, he had a dialogue with the messenger and he was convinced with the message, but he was afraid that people around him, they're going to take him out of power, so he remained quiet. Many people, they saw the signs. They came, and when the messenger would come, they would say, this is the prophet that we've been waiting for. This is the prophet that has been prophesied about. So he sends the letters. As he sends the letter, one part of the Levant, he sends a letter to a governor there, in a part of the Levant. Those messengers that went to deliver the message, they were killed by the group of people that were there. They were killed. One of them, he escapes and he comes back to the Muslims. So now Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he sends an army. He sends an army of 3,000. He sends them to go to the Levant. And because a messenger was killed, and this breaks all protocols of any relationships, any community, any country. So he sends an army of 3,000 and he sends them to the Levant. So who does he put as the heads of this army? The first, he places Ja'far al-Tayyar, Ja'far ibn Abu Talib. He places him, and Ja'far had just come back the year before. On the day the Prophet conquered Khaybar, Ja'far al-Tayyar had come back from Abyssinia, and this was a day where Rasulullah was extremely happy, where he says, I don't know what makes me happier, the conquest of Khaybar or Ja'far coming back, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. And Rasulullah loved Ja'far very much, and Ja'far was a firm believer in Rasulullah. From day one, he was one of the first believers, believing in Rasulullah immediately after Amir al-Mu'mineen. And historians say that it was Amir al-Mu'mineen and Ja'far that would surround Rasulullah and pray around Rasulullah when Rasulullah was in Mecca during his early days. So Rasulullah, he sends Ja'far as the commander. And he tells the Muslims, if Ja'far is killed, then Zayd ibn Haritha is the commander after him. And if Zayd ibn Haritha is killed, then Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he is the commander after him. They tell him, what if Abdullah ibn Rawaha is killed? He tells them, then you guys decide someone from amongst yourselves. So the Muslims, they go. Now the Romans, they had 100,000 people waiting to fight those 3,000. 100,000 people. Because they had heard of the success and the victories of the Muslims. So they realized that this is an unusual group of people. So they prepared 100,000, and behind them for backup they prepared another 100,000. And the battle began, and Rasulullah is in the masjid. He's describing to the Muslims what is happening. Suddenly Rasulullah begins to cry. He begins to cry, and then he tells them the right hand of Ja'far was just cut off. And then he tells them the left hand of Ja'far was cut off. And then he tells them Ja'far has been killed. It is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, he wasn't in the room. He wasn't there when Rasulullah was there. So Imam Ali, he walked in, and Rasulullah tells him, oh Ali, your brother Ja'far has just been killed. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong, and to Him we shall return. And the verse comes down, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ, and give glad tidings to the ones who, if a musibah, إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Those who, if a musibah, calamity falls upon them, they say, to Allah we belong, and to Him we shall return. And then after him, Zayd ibn Haritha, who was the adopted son of the Prophet, and Rasulullah cried for him. And Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he was killed. Then the Muslims, they didn't know what to do. So they gave the command to Khalid ibn al-Walid. They gave the command to Khalid ibn al-Walid. And Khalid ibn al-Walid, he came back with whoever was remaining from the Muslims. They came back to Medina. And many of the Muslims, they tell them, how could you come back? Didn't you want the Shahada? Didn't you anticipate the victory, the Shahada? Because those who went, they were saying, we have either one victory or another victory. There's no loss in this. You either have paradise or you have victory in front of the army. And this shows the faith that they had. So the Muslims, they come back. Now, Quraysh, they see that the Muslims had a sign of weakness. It's been 2 years. It's been 2 years that there has been the Treaty of Hudaybiya. The Hudaybiya Treaty took place in the 6th year after the Hijrah. Now it's the 8th year after the Hijrah. So they realized that there was a weakness in the Muslims. So they said, yeah, maybe these Muslims, they're not going to be victorious in every fight that they go to, because they heard of the Battle of Mu'tah, where Ja'far and Zayd and Abdullah ibn Rawaha were killed. So they said, let's break the treaty with the Muslims. How are they going to break the treaty? They went, a part of the pact, the Treaty of Hudaybiya, is that there's alliances. So the Muslims, they had a treaty with another group, and the Muslims and the Mushrikeen, they had a treaty with another group. Before they broke the treaty, it was the 7th year after the Hijrah. Let's just go back. I skipped a part. Before they go, they broke the treaty. The Muslims in the 7th year after the Hijrah, they said, okay, the Mushrikeen told us come back 1 year later, right? The first year they didn't allow them to go and perform the Umrah. So now the Muslims, they march, and there's still the treaty is still going on. The Muslims, they go and they wear their ihram, and they go and they enter into Mecca. They enter into Mecca, and the Mushrikeen, they're watching the Muslims. They see what the Muslims are doing and they're surprised. They hear them all in single file line walking behind Rasulullah. They're amazed. They hear them doing the takbir and they're walking all together. And with all one loud voice, they're all calling Labbaik Allahumma Labbaik, Labbaik la sharika laka Labbaik. So the mushrikeen are taken in awe. And then Rasulullah, he tells them, let's all recite. And they begin to recite after him. La ilaha illallah wahdahu wahdah. صدق وعده ونصر عبده وهزم الأحزاب وحده. They all begin reciting. The walls of Mecca and the mountains of Mecca begin to shake from the walking and the strength, the power of the Muslims. Of course, they have no weapons with them. They're just carrying a simple sword with them. They go and they do the tawaf around the Kaaba. And then they go and they perform the sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. So the mushrikeen, they were watching the Muslims while performing the sa'i. They said between one another, they said, look, the Muslims are tired, they're exhausted. So Rasulullah, he reached a place in the mas'a, in the middle of the mas'a. He tells all of the Muslims, let's hurdle. Let's hurdle. And the Muslims, they begin to hurdle to show their strength, to show their might. And today, every Muslim that goes, if you're a man, you go in the sa'i part. There's a part in the mas'a, in the middle of the sa'i between Safa and Marwa, where you have to hurdle. You have to hurdle. This is the sign. This is something that Rasulullah did. He came to show them the strength, and everyone in Mecca was shocked and surprised. How did this man Muhammad, who was so weak, he had nothing, he had no power, now he has these men with him who will obey him and will do anything that he does. They see Rasulullah going and doing wudu. They see him performing the wudu, and they see the Muslims going and they're trying to take the water that is falling from the face and the hands of Rasulullah. They said, what has this man done? Then the Muslims, they're there, they stay there for 3 days. Rasulullah, he goes and he visits the grave of Khadijah, the grave of Abu Talib. Some of the Muslims, they go and they visit their homes. They were kicked out of their homes. Then they come to them and they tell them, you have to leave. They come to them and they tell them, you have to leave. There, the verse of Surah Al-Fath comes down. Allah says in the Quran, لَقَدْ صَدَقَ اللَّهُ رَسُولَهُ الرُّؤْيَا بِالْحَقِّ لَتُدْخِلَنَّ الْمَسْجِدَ الْحَرَامَ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ آمِنِينَ مُحَلِّقِينَ. Here, 1 year later, Allah says, Allah kept the promise of the dream of Rasulullah that you will enter into Masjid al-Haram and you will shave your head and you will perform the Umrah. So that verse came down a year later, a year after the Prophet had a dream. Now, then Quraysh, they saw after that, they saw that the Muslims, they went in the battle of Mu'tah and they lost in the battle. There is where Quraysh decided to break the pact with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they began to help another group against another group, and that was a breaking of the pact, and they realized that. And everyone realized that, and Quraysh was very regretful for what they had done. But this was the beginning of the Fath. This was the beginning of the conquest of Mecca, which we will talk about inshaAllah tomorrow. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi al-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.